Well, hello, Whiz Kids, and welcome to Fearbusters Week 7 and Part 2. If you've not watched Part 1, go watch that first, then come back to this one. So, today we are busting fear with God's help. And we all need God's help. Back in Bible times, they needed God's help, and today we need God's help, and especially when we're afraid. Those are the times when we need God's help the most, and we say, God, help! Okay, so we are looking at Judges chapters 6 and 7, and I'd love it if you Whiz Kids throughout this week could read Judges chapters 6 and 7 for yourselves, okay? And let me know that you've read it. That'd be brilliant. Okay, so in Judges chapters 6 and 7, the Israelites have been a little bit bad. They've turned away from God, and there's a group of people called the Midianites who have come in, and they're being quite mean to the Israelites. Those Midianites are stealing their food and doing all sorts of mean things to them. So the Israelites were a little bit stubborn. They're a bit like us, like me and you sometimes, and they didn't go straight to God. Instead, they moaned a little bit, and we can be a bit like that, can't we? Sometimes we say, Mum, Dad, brother, sister, help. And God's saying, come and ask me. I really want to help. So eventually, the Israelites went to God and asked him for help. And God, of course, said, yes, I will help you. And he did so in the form of sending an angel to a man called Gideon. And that angel said, God has a plan to help you. And I'm going to help you to defeat the Midianites. And Gideon was rather scared. And so he got a fleece. That means like a bit of wool. And he put it outside of his house. And he said, God, if this fleece is wet in the morning and everywhere else is dry, then I know that you want to help me. And amazingly, he woke up, found that his fleece was all wet and everywhere else was dry. So he knew that God had done a miracle and God was going to help him. God was on his side. So he got himself together a great big Israelite army, 32,000 of them. And he said, right, this army is going to go and fight the Midianites. And then God stopped him. God said, no, I don't want your 32,000 men. I want you to get rid of all the ones who are afraid. So Gideon says to the men, which ones of you are afraid? And he was maybe hoping that just one or two would put their hands up. But amazingly, 22,000 of them did. And Gideon told them all to go home. So that means he lost more than half his army. Right, imagine this is 22,000. They're all going home. Bye. So he was left with an army of 10,000 men. And then God spoke to him again and said, no, that's still too many men, Gideon. I want you to get rid of some more. And so Gideon did so, and he was left with just 300 men. God told him to just keep 300. So I've got 3 men here who represent those 300 men that Gideon had to keep. And God said, now I am going to fight the Midianites with your 300 men. And there were thousands of Midianites. So Gideon was feeling quite scared, and I can imagine the other Israelites were too. But God had a plan. God got them to get their horns, to get some horns, to get some torches, and to get some jars. And he set them to around the Midianite camp. They sneaked around them whilst the Midianites were asleep. And then after 3, 1, 2, 3, they all threw their jars down. God told them to throw the jars down to start tooting on their horns and making lots of noise. And amazingly, the Midianites woke up. They thought they were being invaded by thousands, and they all started to kill each other, and then they all ran away. So these two can be the Midianites. There they go, fighting each other. And then they ran off. And amazingly, that 300 men defeated all those Midianites. Isn't that amazing? So what can we learn from that amazing story? Okay, I'd love it if you could get a pen and paper and write down these things that I'm going to tell you. Number 1, God's plan is always the best. God's plan is always the best. So with his plan, nobody got hurt in the Israelite army, did they? All they had to do was throw some jars down and toot some horns, and amazingly they'd won the battle. Isn't that amazing? So God's plan is always the best. He had that plan and he knew what would happen. And so when we're in trouble, we need to ask God, God, can you give me your plan for getting out of this? Number 2, God will help us if we ask him. We need to ask him for help, okay? We need to spend time listening to him. Say, God, please help me. And he will. And we have to ask God and then do what he says. Because sometimes If you're a bit like me, I can ask God and then I go off and do my own thing. We need to listen, ask him what we should do, and then do what God says, okay? That's really important, okay? Now let's look at a few scenarios. So, if you're feeling really afraid because you're going to be on stage and you need to do a song on stage, or you're going to be doing a play and you've got stage fright, what should you do? That's right, I hope you've got it. You're going to ask God for help and he will help you. He'll give you an idea. He'll take away all that fear inside. He'll give you some ideas about how to feel less scared and he'll help you. Number 2, if someone's being mean to you, what should you do? Ask God for help. He might help you to say something which will make that person say, I'm really, really sorry for what I've said. I'm sorry for being mean. I shouldn't have been. And finally, if you're finding your schoolwork really, really hard, what should you do? That's right. Once again, God, please can you help me? Put your trust in God in every situation and he will help you. So all of your fears can be busted with God's help. So, Whiz Kids, I think we have come to the end of this amazing session. Let's always bust fears with God's help from now on. Okay, God bless you all.